Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the post-game podcast for the Timberwolves' 1-point win over the Dallas Mavericks, the Luka Doncic list, and also a lot of other rotation guy lists, Dallas Mavericks. But still, a 1-point win. A great game for Jaden McDaniels, career high 27 points. An interesting close to this game. The Wolves hit another bit of a rough patch in the fourth quarter of a game, but lots of positives from this one. We'll talk about Naz. We'll talk about Mike Conley. What went well for Minnesota in this win over Dallas? It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic have had a fantastic first half plus of the week. The Wolves won on Wednesday night to beat the Dallas Mavericks by a single point. Of course, Dallas missing a billion guys. We'll talk about that in a second. But still, good for the Wolves to finally win a close game, even if they did just kind of hang on. We'll talk about the rough start to the game. We'll talk about really strong middle half of the game. The second and third quarters were really impressive for Minnesota, and even the start to the fourth quarter. And then kind of what happened down the stretch and how many bullets did they dodge with Kyrie down the stretch, because they dodged some bullets for sure. So lots to get to in this one. We'll talk about Jaden McDaniels' career high. We'll talk about Ant's performance and more. So big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. And a reminder about the daily newsletter. Sign up at LockedOnDaily.com and you will get a daily email Monday through Friday with a rundown of Wolves notes from this show. You'll also get some links to other Wolves content from around the internet and some league-wide NBA coverage as well. So sign up to for the Locked On Wolves daily email newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. All right. Let's talk about this game against the Mavericks. So coming in, obviously no Kyrie Irving, right? No Luka Doncic. We knew Luka Doncic was out. Remember, he hurt his calf back on Christmas against the Wolves. He's been out ever since. And I believe they had initially said he'd be reevaluated in about a month. So he could be back on the court soon. Dallas coming into this game was 4-9 without Luka. So obviously goes without saying how important he is to their team. Kyrie's been scoring a bunch lately, but it mostly hasn't been enough. I mean, they lost to Charlotte by 5 the other night. They came into this one. We knew they wouldn't have Luka. We knew there were some other guys that were questionable. I believe Jaden Hardy was questionable. I think Derek Lively was questionable, but they just announced on Wednesday that he's going to be out for months. There was also no Klay Thompson, no Najee Marshall, no Dwight Powell, no Dante Exum. Those are all rotation tangential guys for Dallas. And I mean, like, compared to the last time the Wolves saw Dallas, like, obviously you still got Kyrie, you still got PJ Washington. Daniel Gafford's always played well against Minnesota. He was good in this game too. Quentin Grimes was big off the bench for them earlier this year, but he was forced to the starting lineup. And so the bench is Spencer Dinwiddie and Maxi Kleber and beyond them, it was Kessler Edwards and Brandon Williams. And it just, like, not a lineup Minnesota should have struggled with, but I believe they were only favored by 3.5 on FanDuel coming into this game because of the Wolves' own struggles, and they've been better on the road than at home, but obviously on the road in Dallas for this one-off. And a lot of factors that could have, that kind of made this game be closer than maybe it should have been. Now, the other reason why this game was super important is the Wolves came into this game tied in the season series 1-1 with Dallas and a game behind them in the standings. Well, now they have an identical record as Dallas, and they have the tiebreaker, and they're done with the Mavs this year. They only play 3 regular season games against Dallas, and they've won 2 of them. So they will have the tiebreaker if it comes down to it, whether it's, play-in versus playoffs or seeding within the play-in or within the playoffs. It's nice, really nice to have that tiebreaker. And now they're actually ahead of them in the standings because of that tiebreaker. All right. So this game started out really kind of putrid offensively for both teams. Minnesota scored just 17 points in the first quarter. This was just like a rock fight. Dallas kind of, I don't know that I want to use the word surged, but pushed ahead toward the end of the first quarter. So Minnesota was down 5. But early, the Wolves offense just felt very like deliberate, very rigid. It was like, okay, pass, drive into a crowd, maybe kick it out for a brick of a 3-pointer or just get my shot blocked. Pass around the perimeter and then a difficult shot in the paint. Like it just felt like, okay, here's what we do next. And everything was kind of telegraphed. The intention was there. Like there was a little bit of ball movement, but the possessions weren't ending well. They were just kind of like, I think the best word to use is rigid. Like it just was very strange. Because the process wasn't always terrible. It was just like, why is this the shot they're getting out of this? It improved in a big way in the second quarter. Naz Reid and Mike Conley were the biggest reasons for it. Both those guys were fantastic in the second quarter, and they both finished with really nice games. I mean, Conley made his first, I think, 5 shots from the field. He finished 6 of 9 and 4 of 6 on threes. He had a big floater in the second half of this one, but he did a lot of damage in the second quarter, and he really was. You could argue this side of Jaden McDaniels, he was the Wolves' best player on the floor in this game. He had a plus 19. The Wolves won this game by a single point, and Mike Conley was a plus 19. Nobody else was better than a plus 6 in this game for the Timberwolves. That's how good Mike Conley was. And finished with 18, 8, and 5 with no turnovers, plus added 2 steals. I mentioned the 4 made threes. Nobody else in the Wolves made more than 2 threes individually. And a ton of that damage came in the second quarter when the Wolves needed it. They came into the quarter having just scored 17 points in the first frame. They were down 5. And Mike Conley was a big reason for success in that quarter. Naz Reid, same thing. He only had 12 points at the end of the day, 12.6 rebounds. He had some issues in the fourth quarter again, like he did the other night, or the other day, I guess, against Memphis, I think it was. But Naz was really good in the second quarter. Hit like a nice kind of runner in the lane. I think he knocked on at least 1 3 in that quarter, maybe 2. Just really strong play from those 2 guys that helped the Wolves ultimately surge ahead and get a 2-point lead by halftime. But they were the biggest positives in the second quarter, and it really continued into the third. The third quarter was a lot more Anthony Edwards. Anthony had 8 points at halftime. I think he was 1 of 6 shooting in the first half, made some free throws, and that was really the only reason he was even really on the board. But he did a lot of his scoring in the third quarter. And again, the ball movement improved. It actually wasn't terrible to start. They were just missing shots and driving into crowds. But as the game wore on, they ended up with more opportunities in transition. And I've been clamoring for the Wolves to do more in transition since last year. They did a little bit more of it when Cat was out last March with the knee injury, and they just never were comfortable playing faster. And I get it to an extent. You have Rudy Gobert. You set up your defense in the half court, especially last year. But this year, the offense is showing signs of life. The defense is good, but it's nowhere near as frankly dominant as it was last year. Why not increase some variance in some of these games? Why not make things easier on your offense by getting some easy buckets in transition? The Wolves finally did that in this game against a team in Dallas that, can push the pace too, especially without Luka. They're more likely to push the pace. And Minnesota ended up winning fast break points in this game, 25-8 over Dallas, which is so rare. Like I don't know how I would go about looking this up, but I'd bet the Wolves have not beaten a team by 15 or more in transition and fast break points all season long, maybe even last year. I mean, 25-8. I cannot remember the last time the Timberwolves had an offensive, I should say a fast break performance like this one. They were aggressive, getting out in transition, also getting, and I'm assuming in this statistic that's going to include semi-transition or what I like to call secondary break opportunities, where guys like Jaden McDaniels are super lethal in the open floor. It's not always the first guy down the floor. It's that secondary where the first guy drives down. Dallas does a good job of getting back. You're kicking it out either for an open 3 or it's a pump fake and a drive for that next guy, or it's a pass drive, pass shot. That secondary break for the Wolves has been so deadly of late. And Jaden did a lot of damage in that. That's also something Naz is really good at. Mike Conley's really good at leading those breaks. And occasionally you'll get a Gobert trail dunk in those situations, or, that's, or an Ant trail 3. Sometimes if he's not leading the break, Ant sometimes likes to slow down tempo. If he's late getting back, he might get a trail 3 out of it. So I think the break and the secondary break, I know that they were really key in this game. I mean, again, winning that category, the fast break category, 25-8 was huge. And so the Wolves took this thing from a 5-point deficit in the first quarter, at the end of the first quarter, to a 2-point halftime lead, to a 4-point lead going to the fourth quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, they pushed this thing to a 12-point lead with Ant off the floor. I want to talk a little bit about that lineup. I want to talk about what happened when, after they built that 12-point lead, Dallas pushed back. The Wolves ultimately did a good job of not allowing Dallas to take a lead. But what happened in those middle stages of the fourth quarter that nearly caused just a miserable collapse and loss for the Wolves? We'll talk about what happened in the fourth here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our new friends at TALKSPACE. TALKSPACE is a fantastic place for therapy. And look, therapy can be an absolute game changer. And I'm not the only one that could attest to that. I'm sure there's people in your life that you could talk to that would also attest to it. Therapy can help you manage stress, can help you improve your sleep, and communicate more effectively. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. That's always the biggest thing for me. And that's where TALKSPACE comes in. TALKSPACE is the leading virtual therapy provider. It makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With TALKSPACE, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours. Plus, it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, TALKSPACE is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize mental health. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with TALKSPACE when you go to TALKSPACE.com/LockedOnNBA and enter the promo code SPACE80, SPACE80 to match with a licensed therapist today. Go to TALKSPACE.com/LockedOnNBA, enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's TALKSPACE.com/LockedOnNBA, promo code SPACE80. All right, so the Timberwolves went to the fourth quarter up just 4 points against the shorthanded Mavs team. And again, the middle stages of the game were so much better for Minnesota. They came out like gangbusters in the fourth quarter. And this is a no Ant lineup. Remember, Ant sits the first few minutes of every fourth quarter, almost every fourth quarter. So Mike Conley's on the floor, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Naz Reid. Those were really the guys that made the most noise. I believe Rob Dillingham was on the floor to start the fourth. And did I say Jaden? I don't think I said Jaden. Jaden would have been the other guy on the floor. To start the fourth quarter, something else that I guess I'll get back to was offensive rebounding. Minnesota had 9 offensive rebounds, which isn't like a massive number, but a ton of those came late in the game. Julius Randle had a couple big ones down the stretch we'll talk about. The fourth quarter started with a possession where Mike Conley missed a 3, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker scooped up an offensive rebound. That led to a Naz Reid three-pointer. Naz Reid hits a 3 on the next possession down after the Wolves forced a shot clock violation on the Mavs. Then Dallas hits a couple of quick shots. PJ Washington scored. Then actually Nickeil loses it out of bounds. PJ Washington scores. So now all of a sudden it's a 5-point game again. Then Nickeil scores in the paint. Tough shot. And then Jaden McDaniels, after he steals the ball from Kyrie, comes down and makes a shot in transition. Now they're up 9. Then Nickeil hits a 3 to push it to a 12-point game with 9.5 minutes left. So that is a Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid run. Those 3 guys did all of it and put the Wolves up by 12. After the timeout, the Mavs come out, get another shot clock violation. The Wolves don't do anything on their end of the floor, and it's kind of 2 minutes where there's hardly any scoring, really sloppy on both ends. Kyrie and Dinwiddie are on the floor for Dallas. Still no Anthony Edwards on the floor for Minnesota. After some empty offensive possessions that led to a tough Naz miss, you had actually a couple of Naz misses in there. McDaniels gets blocked by Gafford. Kleba gets a dunk to cut it to an 8-point game. And Chris Finch calls a timeout. The Timberwolves come back out onto the court and immediately turn it over. Nickeil throws a bad pass. Dinwiddie steals an attempted pass for the corner. They score in transition. It's a 6-point game. A bit more of a back-to-back. Naz Reid gets, or back and forth, I should say. Naz gets called for a foul and then a technical where they're lined up for free throws. It looked like he was either talking to the ref behind him or maybe even a teammate. For whatever reason, the ref on the other side of the floor decided to call him for a technical. That ends up being a 4-point possession for the Mavericks because it was a 3-point play PJ Washington made. Kyrie gets the technical free throw. It's now a 4-point game. Julius Randle sets a sloppy screen. Turnover. Back to the Mavs. The Mavs score on a 3. Kyrie hits a deep 3. It's a 1-point game. Thankfully, Jaden comes back and hits a 3 on the other end, and the Wolves actually never let Dallas take a lead. And in fact, Minnesota pushed it back to a 9-point game with 3 minutes to play. But then you have more execution problems down the stretch. Conley misses a 3. They foul Kyrie. He hits a couple of free throws. Randle starts to force things. He misses a shot. Then the next possession down, he commits a turnover. Dallas gets a couple more free throws. And it's just almost the same thing as what happened in the Memphis game and the Cleveland game before that. Less so, I guess, the Cleveland game they had to come back in. So really the Memphis game Monday, I guess, is the freshest example where it's just sloppy execution. The technical on Naz, fair or unfair, the Randle offensive foul, some rush threes that led to misses. And ultimately, they got a bunch of offensive rebounds on key possessions that I referenced earlier. And Julius Randle was a big part of that led to some second chance opportunities and some free throws and ultimately allowed the Wolves to kind of keep the Mavs at arm's length. But even still, Jaden with 3 seconds left has a chance to ice the game, misses his first free throw, which, by the way, would have given him a career high. He hits the second one to effectively end the game. The Mavs still hit the 3 at the buzzer to make it a 1-point game. But if Jaden doesn't hit that second free throw, like, this thing's a tie game. It's going to overtime. It's just the attention to detail down the stretch, which, yes, in some ways comes back to coaching. But Chris Finch can't make Julius Randle not set a sloppy screen. Chris Finch can't make Naz Reid not get a technical foul that he maybe didn't even deserve in the first place. The offensive execution, I think, is still a fair kind of quibble because when games tighten and they're not able to get some of those easier baskets in transition, and Ant's not piping hot from the field and can't hit these impossible, ridiculous shots. Like a couple of the shots Ant took down the stretch, he took a really tough one, I think, with about a minute and a half left. Wolves up 5. He took like a really tough contested 3 that was like behind, or it was a 2. It was a long 2, like behind the backboard. He forced himself into another contested, I think it was a corner 3. They're just reliant on, can we get these calls or can we make these really tough shots? The Memphis game, it was more, remember, my whole thing in that game was Memphis was actually getting into the paint and forcing the officials to make the calls. And the Wolves were taking tough 3s instead of open 3s or getting into the paint to try and create either a foul or a kick out opportunity for a 3. So it's just, I don't know what it is. It doesn't feel like they're like actively panicking. It's just like this slow backslide into, oh no, here we go again. They're going to make this really difficult on themselves. In the Memphis game, they lost, actually both Memphis games, they lost by a bucket. The Dallas game, they held on and won by a single point. On the plus side of things that I talked about on Tuesday's show, they're in virtually every single game. On the negative side, some of these games, like this Dallas game, they should have won by multiple possessions because of who they were playing, who was and who wasn't, in this case, on the floor for the other team. And they're also just failing to execute when it does get down to close and late situations. So that's going to require a bit more, diving into. And I just think it's it's just they don't go through full, like, we talked about this with the ATO play where that Ant blew up. I think that was which game was it last week where Ant aborted what he was supposed to be doing on the play and did something different. Like, it's stuff like that that's just kind of silly, unforced errors that they have to cut out of what they're doing. And they were fortunate to hang on in this one. I referenced the offensive rebounds earlier. The Wolves had 9 offensive rebounds. The Mavs had 7 in this game. But for Minnesota, those Julius Randle ones toward the end, the Nikhil that led to the 3-point shot at the start of the fourth quarter that helped them build that 12-point lead. Those were all key rebounds for Minnesota. And for them to out offensive rebound their opponent is a pretty rare thing, just like the fast break points that I talked about. The other thing is that the Wolves only committed 11 turnovers in this game. I think they had 4 like midway through the third quarter. I mean, that was part of this kind of, that wasn't a full collapse, but semi-collapse in the fourth quarter was the sloppiness, the Julius Randle screen. Ant dribbled the ball off his foot at one point. Like, it was just like that was kind of it. Otherwise, they didn't really commit turnovers. I think they had 3 in the whole first half. It just kind of an uncharacteristic Wolves game in the way that they won. Also, they attempted the same number of 3s as Dallas. Each team attempted 29 3s. The Wolves made 3 more 3s than Dallas. But Minnesota did so much of their damage at the free throw line. They attempted 15, not 23, not 25, 15 more free throws than Dallas, which is also rare. It's rare for Minnesota to out free throw their opponent, out offensive rebound their opponent, out fast break point their opponent, and not shoot more threes than their opponent. This was not your typical Timberwolves like anatomy of a win. Very unusual. All right, let's close by talking studs and duds. We will talk Jaden, we'll talk Ant, we'll talk Conley. We'll talk a little bit about Dillingham's game as well. That's all upcoming. That's how we'll close the show here today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Gametime, our title sponsors at Gametime. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy, all of the above. My wife and I will go to sporting events. We'll go with friends to sporting events and concerts. My wife and I will go to Broadway shows. If we're traveling, we'll go to them here where we live. We'll go to stand-up comedy shows. There's a couple of favorite venues. All of the above you can find on Gametime. And now Gametime has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets to a concert, actually, and I used the Gametime app. And guess what? With Gametime Picks, you can find amazing deals. You can even see the view from your seat before buying. The super deal, was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, let's talk individual studs and duds from Wolves Mavs. Obviously, Jaden McDaniels gets a stud in this game. He was great. 27 points on 10 of 18 shooting. He was only 1 of 5 on threes. And at one point in the game, early on, I would say, actually, second quarter, it might have actually been third quarter when he clanked a couple of corner threes. I thought I was going to be sitting here on this podcast talking about, again, the Wolves' failure to hit corner threes, and Jaden specifically, because Dallas was just leaving him wide open. He was 1 of 5 on three-pointers in this game. He was 9 of 13 on twos. And the majority of his twos came in transition or semi-transition, the secondary break. 1 of 5 on threes. I believe they were all from the corner. 6 of 8 at the free throw line. He had 8 rebounds, 4 steals, and 3 blocks. Only 2 turnovers in this game. He didn't have any assists. But if Jaden's going to turn into 27 and 8 with 7 stocks and not be in foul trouble, I mean, he played 40 minutes in this game. He led the Timberwolves in minutes played. He was really effective defensively. And obviously, you're not really going to slow down Kyrie Irving. You're just going to try and make things difficult, maybe force the ball out of his hands. He still scored 36 on 21 shots, only turned it over 3 times. PJ Washington had 30 on 22 shots. Those are the only guys that were ever going to really do any damage. They did a good job on Dinwiddie. He shot 4 of 13. Minnesota was physical defensively. Credit Ant and Mike Conley for that too. But Jaden's length really bothered Dallas in a way that it never really did in the playoffs last year. Now, obviously, no Luka, no all the other guys I mentioned, but I thought Jaden's length really played in this game, and he was effective. It actually felt like he had more than 7 stocks in this game. He was just kind of everywhere defensively. If he could just hit corner threes at the rate he did 2 years ago, the man would the Wolves be in business. I'm serious. Like, the offense is already kind of looking better than it did for a lot of last year, just for the last 3 to 4 weeks. The offense has been so much better. If they could just, with some consistency, find guys besides Nikhil, and he's been struggling a little bit of late, who can just knock down corner threes with confidence, that would change a lot for this offense. And speaking of, having Mike Conley play like this would also change a lot. Now, the Wolves aren't going to be able to rely on Mike Conley at age 37 doing what he did in this game, because he hasn't been able to do that to this point in the year. And who knows, maybe they're hitting some sweet spot where, like, he's in game shape now, at age 37, 40 plus games into the season. But, like, by the time we get to May, he's going to be broken down like he was last year in the playoffs. I don't know. Hopefully that's not the case. But the Wolves would take, the next 2 or 3 months of A+ Mike Conley too. I mean, he had 18 points on 6 of 9 shooting, 4 of 6 on threes, 8 assists, and 0 turnovers for Mike Conley. Plus, he pitched in 5 rebounds and 2 steals, including a couple, one of those pickpockets. I forget who the guard was, but he just stonewalled him and took the ball from him. Really, really nice Mike Conley game. It's got to be about his best game this season. I'd like, again, you can't rely on 18, 8, and 5 and a couple of steals from Conley every night, but boy, would it be nice if they got it a little bit more often. And then the third stud for me in this one, I actually think I'm going to go Julius Randle. And I know he wasn't efficient. You could argue Naz Reid. He had that big second quarter. You could argue Ant because of he did a 21-7, although he did a good job getting to the line. This is tough. I'm going to split it between Randle and Ant. I'm going to cheat. Let's talk about Ant first. Ant had 21-7. He also had 5 rebounds. Shot only 6 of 19, which is not good. He started like 1 of 6, and it never got better. He was only 2 of 7 on threes. One of his twos was a foot on the line 3 he could have been 3 of 8 from 3 if he just stepped a half inch backwards. He was 7 of 8 at the line, did a really good job for a second consecutive game of getting to the free throw line, which he has not been doing this season. And if he didn't do that in this game, the Wolves would have been in trouble, and he wouldn't have had anywhere near as good of a game. The 7 assists, and he did have 3 turnovers, but the 7 assists were nice. Like overall, it was a solid Ant performance, even if it was quiet early on. I thought he was important to what the Wolves had to do to win. Julius, same thing, not effective from the field. Like neither one of these guys. Like they combined to shoot 10 of 32 from the field. That's not good. I mean, that's below 33%, is what the quick math will tell you. But I thought they both played okay. Julius had 16 points on 4 of 13, 1 of 2 on threes. Continues to look kind of uncomfortable shooting 3-pointers. He really has of late looked uncomfortable doing that. 7 of 8 at the free throw line. So they combined to shoot 10 of 32 from the field, but they combined to shoot 14 of 16 at the line. Randle had 6 rebounds, including 3 offensive rebounds, a couple of those big ones late in the fourth quarter that I mentioned already. He also had 3 assists and 3 steals in this game. 3 assists and 3 steals. Minnesota had 10 steals in this game, 7 combined from Randle and McDaniels. Conley had a couple, and then Naz had 1. But Julius was really good. He had this second best plus minus too. My only dud in this game is Rob Dillingham, and I feel kind of bad giving him a dud. He only played 9 minutes. For as good and confident as he looked against Memphis, he came out shooting, like firing. Like he shot a couple of threes in the first minute he played, and that was it. He shot the ball 3 times in this game, including a missed layup. Contested shot in the paint. 0 of 2 outside the arc, 1 assist, 1 turnover for Dillingham. He was a -8. Nobody else was worse than a -5 in a game the Wolves won by 1. It happens. Not like he wasn't actively bad. Dallas tried to hunt him defensively, tried to exploit him on the defensive end of the floor when the Wolves were on defense, and it happened a couple of times where they kind of got a step on him. Like I forget who scored on him. It might have been, I don't think it was Kyrie. It might have been Dinwiddie. I think Dillingham kind of got on his hip and couldn't recover, and he held him off. There was another play where Nikhil wouldn't let Dallas switch onto, or wouldn't let Dillingham get switched onto. I think it was Kyrie. So the Wolves, that's something they're going to have to deal with is scheming around that or planning around Rob and his matchups on that end of the floor. And if he's not hitting offensively, then it's tough to have him out there. So it's just such a tough life, being that microwave scorer off the bench, because if you don't have it, you're going to get pulled. And if you don't have it right away, you're going to get pulled. If you do have it right away, you might play 25 minutes and score a bunch of points. Like we saw, he played 16 minutes, had 18 points, or 18 minutes, had 16 points against Memphis, something like that. This was the opposite of that. He played 9 minutes, had no points. I also want to point out Rudy Gobert did some nice things. Like he had some nice passes early in the game. He got to the line a bunch and made all 8 of his free throws, but rebounding continues to be an issue. He only had 6 boards in this game. I mean, Gafford had 12, and 6 boards was tied for second on the Wolves team. And this is a topic for another day, but Rudy Gobert by far has the worst rebound rate of his career. It's only the second time in his entire career that he's had a rebound rate below 20%, and he's down near 17%. After this game, I bet it's right at 17%. So we got to have that conversation. How much of it is circumstance versus is this dude just not getting any lift at all anymore and he's just batting the ball around instead of grabbing it, which I think it's more the latter. And I referenced that the other day, but he's got to do more work on the glass. Like he's just got to be better there, especially when they've got some of these smaller lineups out there. I thought the guards and wings did a good job in this game with that. Like Nickeil had a big defensive rebound late where he just kind of pinched into the elbow and grabbed, scooped up. I think it was a Kyrie miss in the final couple of minutes. Like some of those things the Wolves don't always do a good job of that are essentially 50-50 balls. Conley had an offensive rebound that late in the game where he stole the ball from Kleba. Those types of plays they haven't made at times this year, they did make. So I do want to point that out. Those 50-50 ball type long rebounds on both ends of the floor, but especially on the defensive glass, they did make in this game. And that helps Rudy and it helps Julius Randle. But we need more of it from Jaden. We need more of it from Conley, Ant, Nickeil, etc. Jaden, by the way, I mentioned his 8 rebounds. That was a team high. He led the team in rebounding, which is so nice to see out of Jaden McDaniels. Just one of the better games you're ever going to see him play. All right. That's all I got for you on this one. The Wolves don't play again until Saturday. They have a Saturday afternoon game against Denver. Friday's show, let's see, this is Thursday's show. Friday, might have a guest on Friday. We'll see. But we'll get you ready for the weekend. We'll get you ready for Wolves Nuggets on Saturday. We'll talk about some lineup related stuff as well. Maybe talk a little Rob. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what we have on top for you on Friday, but we may have a guest for that one. Otherwise, that's all we got for you today here on the show. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder, you can sign up for the daily Locked On Wolves newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. One stop for ultimate Wolves and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.